to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
I welcome you to part 2 of a 6-week series entitled Conflict, Hostility, or Harmony. We've been very fortunate at North Idaho College, at the North Idaho College Popcorn Forum series, to have a week on this very important subject. The second program that we're airing here today is on conflicts in the family, and we could not have a better expert than we have today to deal with this very important topic. I welcome to the program Dr. John M. Haynes from New York. Dr. Haynes is one of the nation's leading mediation experts. In the last 5 years, he has trained over 4,000 professionals in mediation, conflict management, and negotiations in such countries as the United States, Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. Our guest, over the last 10 years, has mediated over 2,000 divorce cases and other interpersonal disputes, including the business community and intercorporate differences. Dr. Haynes has appeared on many national TV programs such as the Today Show, Nightline, CNN, Newswatch, and the Wall Street Journal Report. Dr. Haynes has been discussed in articles in such publications as the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, Newsweek, and the New York Magazine. Dr. Haynes, we're very privileged to have you in Coeur d'Alene and on our program, and welcome.
Great. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to have 2 members of the panel to assist today in questioning our distinguished guest. To my immediate left is Janelle Burke, and next to her is Sue Flamia, both attorneys in the state of Idaho, and I shall ask Janelle Burke to commence the questioning.
Dr. Haynes, what exactly is mediation? How does mediation differ, say, from arbitration? Can you give our viewers a little idea of what mediation is? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, can you tell us some of the primary reasons for mediation as opposed to other means of dispute resolution?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mediation is where two parties have a dispute or a conflict, and they call in a third party, a mediator, to help them negotiate a settlement of that conflict or dispute. The mediator differs from an arbitrator or a judge in that a judge will impose a settlement, an arbitrator will impose a settlement. The mediator helps the parties to the dispute arrive at the settlement. It must be totally voluntary. So that's the basic difference. So in a sense, you can think of a mediator as the manager of other people's negotiations. Where is it used? It's used all over the world in all kinds of situations where the future relationship is important. That is that when you have a dispute, and if you litigate, you usually wind up one side winning, one side losing, and both sides destroying the relationship. Where you want to maintain the relationship afterwards, then you use mediation. Most widely it's used in this country in areas of divorce, particularly around children. After all, even though 2 parties are going to get divorced, they're always going to be the children's mother and father, and they always will have that relationship, even though they're ending the relationship as husband and wife. It's used in corporate situations, interdepartmental situations, disputes between 2 corporations that need to resolve the dispute and continue working together as buyer-seller. Wherever there's a need to preserve the relationship and to settle the problem, mediation seems to be the best method of dispute resolution.
Sue Flamia.
I would like to ask Dr. Haynes would you talk about the impact of the number of divorces we're witnessing in the United States, the impact of divorce on children?
Mm-hmm. What you have today is, approximately 2.4 million marriages each year and 1.2 million divorces. And the majority of those divorces involve children. So you probably have something like 3 million or so children each year impacted by the divorce of their parents. The importance, I think, of mediation is that mediation attempts to preserve the parents' relationship as parents and also preserve the relationship of each parent with the children. So that what we find, if you look at those situations where divorce causes problems for kids, it is usually because A, the conflict at the time of the divorce has been incredibly high, and they've been sucked into that conflict. B, it's because the conflict continues after the divorce, and that as a result of that conflict, the children lose one parent, in the sense they're forced to choose between mom and dad. And unfortunately, if you think about the typical way of handling a divorce in the litigation arena, the end result is a winner and a loser, and you get often the destruction of the relationship. In mediation, the focus is always on how to structure the future parenting for children. Now, there's a lot of evidence to show that most children can get through divorce. There's always going to be some pain, some discombobulation in their lives. But the evidence suggests that most children can get through divorce okay if they keep strong relationship with both parents after the parents separate. And so it seems to me that what we're finding is that we can lower the trauma of divorce to children if we can assure the kids that the parents are separating as adults, not as mom and dad.
I would like Dr. Haynes to move into the area of metaphors. I was very impressed yesterday and again today with your discussion. We are very tied to a language as we communicate, obviously, with other people, and we use a lot of metaphors that, from what you have discussed, has convinced me that has a lot to do with conflict and misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Would you discuss the use of metaphors and a couple of examples?
Yeah. Well, a metaphor is where we use a physical description of something to describe an idea, because we can't communicate ideas except by giving them physical qualities. And so that what we find in terms of argument or conflict is that the most common metaphor that we use is that argument is war. So that most of the discussions about arguments are, I demolished his argument, she marshaled her facts, those kinds of words that we use. And when we think about it, if we are in fact engaged in a conflict and we're marshalling our arguments, then we've got our troops in line, we're setting our ducks in a row, right? We're doing all those things that, in a sense, legitimate more warlike behavior. I've discovered that in mediation, as a mediator, I tend to use the metaphor that conflict is a journey. As we all have conflict in our lives all of the time, and the resolution of that conflict takes a journey. And so that I might begin with the couple and talk about, well, let's get all the facts together so we can start from solid ground. And then let's see where we go with this one. Let's see if we can cross that hurdle, see if we can cross that bridge when we reach it, see where we go with this one. So I'm constantly thinking about it as a journey. And my sense is that when you talk about it as a journey, then most journeys have a goal, an ending, and people can see hope in the conflict rather than a lack of hope that comes in a conflict that's configured around the war metaphor.
Thank you. Janelle Berg.
Dr. Haynes, would you please walk us through the mediation process? Could you begin with telling us how does a person start in mediation, or a couple, if let's say we have a divorce situation here, how do they start in mediation? How often do they meet with the mediator? Do they set goals? What is the process?
Okay. Now, people will come to a mediator from one of two routes. In some jurisdictions, the judge will ask them to go to mediation if the parents are in high conflict about their children. Because the judges usually tell the families that whilst the judges care about the kids, they don't love them in the same sense that each parent loves the child. And really, if parents can make their own decisions, they're much better off. So in some jurisdictions, you may get referred to the mediator by the court. In other situations, you may choose mediation simply out of your own desire to not escalate what is already a bad situation in divorce by accomplishing the divorce, and particularly the arrangements around the children, in a sensible and low-key way. So the couple then will come to the mediator. The mediator usually meets with them in the first session for an hour. And in that session, we usually try to gather the basic data and try to define the problem. Well, what I discover is that when most people come, the father will come and say, well, the problem is this. And it's always a problem that requires some change on the part of the mother. For example, the dad came to me recently and said, well, the problem is whenever I bring the children back after they've been over at my house, She falls apart, and she starts crying, and if she could just accept this divorce, it would all be okay. The kids wouldn't have a problem. And so you see, his definition can be solved if she shifts. She said, but I don't want the children going over to see him on the weekends because he has his girlfriend over there. And if he wouldn't have this girlfriend, then it would not be a problem. So the problem from her perspective can be solved if he shifts. Now, obviously, those are two legitimate positions, but neither of those are going to solve the real problem of the future parenting of the children. So the mediator helps to develop a problem definition that's sort of mutual, covers both of them, and is neutral. It doesn't benefit him more than it benefits her, and vice versa. So then we get the problem definition. Then we say, okay, this is the problem. What kind of options are there to solve that problem? Let's just now brainstorm and think about all the options that are there. And so we might think about all the different ways we could resolve the problem. Probably put them up on a flip chart, and then the couple then would begin to select which of the options seems the best to them, and then they would negotiate around that issue and bargain around which option to choose to solve the problem. Along the way, the mediator may share ideas with the couple that he's seen with other families. The one thing the mediator will never do is will never tell the parents what to do, because after all, the mediator doesn't have to live with the agreement. The parents have to live with the agreement. So I make a point of never telling them what to do, but helping them look at all of the options. Because as you know, in all of our lives, doesn't matter whether it's you or me or the couple in the middle of a divorce, we tend to have limited vision when we're in a conflict situation. And often the third party can just enlarge the vision to give us a new picture, and in that new picture are new options for solution. So then we negotiate that through and then draft up for the couple an agreement around the children that they could then take back to the judge and go forward with the divorce, having protected the kids.
Just one quick question for the benefit of our viewers. Where can you find dispute or mediation centers? Where can you go to find this, especially if in some of our areas that are more outlying, the people don't know where to go? Do you generally find them in more populated areas? Is there someone that they should contact if they are in need of those kinds of services?
Yeah, there is a Idaho Association of Family Mediators that people can call. I think Sue may have that telephone number, or look up in the yellow pages, because there may well be people locally. But if you call the Idaho Association, they then could refer you to a mediator closest to you.
Maybe Sue should do that at this time.
Right. I would like to let the viewers know there is a Conflict Resolution Center, a nonprofit corporation located 412 Sherman up on the second floor.
Here in Coeur d'Alene.
In Coeur d'Alene. And there are trained mediators who are all either licensed attorneys or mental health professionals. And they have all had training, including training from Dr. Haynes on his last visit to Coeur d'Alene. And there are other centers being developed or in existence in Idaho and also in Washington.
Very good. Sue, your question.
Well, that leads into the question I was going to ask Dr. Haynes. This isn't your first visit out here, and I think the viewers would be interested to know the work that you are doing in training Idaho people as mediators.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think this is now the fourth time I've been here. The second time to Coeur d'Alene, fourth time I think to Idaho. And in each of those visits I've spent the first time I think 3 days and then subsequently 2 days training people in mediation skills, in managing people's conflict, particularly as it refers to the issues of parenting in the divorcing situation. And what we have, I think, here in Idaho is a remarkably well-trained, bright set of mediators, not only because they've been trained by me, but in terms of my observation of them over the last 4 or 5 years, of watching them grow, both in numbers and in stature of their ability to handle the cases. And of course today I'm going to, last time I was here I was working with people who were already mediators, and we were doing some advanced training. These 2 days in Boise, I will be training a group for the basic who are wanting to become mediators in that way, so that we're trying to steadily increase the number of mediators available across the state.
I know that it's very difficult to do on television what you can do with in a training session, because we have that great penalty in television of have such limited time. But I wish you would take our viewers at least through some of the points that you gave our audience today concerning, I believe you have what you call a list of 12 points that individuals should involve themselves with in trying to deal with conflict or even avoid conflict in a personal situation with another person. Could you share at least some of those points with the audience?
Okay. Now this of course is not the mediator role, but looking now at how you at home could handle your conflicts perhaps more productively. So let's think about it. The first is, when you have a conflict, is to be specific about the conflict. To try to be very clear about what it is that you think is wrong. Not to complain, because first of all, nothing is more boring than complaining. And complaining doesn't achieve anything with the other person. But to be very specific as to what the problem is. The description I used today was, you never pick up your shirt, you always drop it by the side of the laundry basket. That's the problem. Suggest a reasonable solution. And the solution then should always be tied specifically to the problem. I suppose after it's happened 4 or 5 times, you can't say, so in the future pick it up, because obviously it's just a repetition. We'd have to go then beyond to find out why it is that you're always dropping your shirt by the side rather than in the basket. But the first off, to be specific, to be clear, and to have a reasonable solution to the problem. The second is to listen intently to what the other person says in response. Now, partly, you really need to listen, because whenever you would criticize somebody else, they get very defensive. And when they're defensive, they will back off, and then usually then go into the offensive and attack you back, because that's the common way of dealing with conflicts. But that if you can listen intently to what the other person is saying, you can begin to extract out of that what it is that they think about the conflict. Now, it may be that they have a different definition of the problem. They may not see it quite as the same conflict. But if you listen intently, you can find out usually what the other person wants out of this. So that's the second point. Third point is, never discount what your partner's thinking or doing. I remember one time my wife came down and complained to me and said, "Why do you do that?" And I said, "Because I love you, darling." And she just got even angrier at that, because obviously I wasn't treating her with respect. I was trying to be funny and sort of push aside her legitimate concern about what it was. So that's the first part. Secondly is don't mind read the other person. That is that we'll always get a good idea of what the other person is feeling. And the reality in life is we never know what the other person is feeling. I know what I'm feeling at any given moment, but I can't tell you with any accuracy what you're feeling at any moment. And particularly if you're angry at me, there's a very bad chance that I would have a clue as to what it is you were thinking, other than your rage. So don't try to analyze the thinking of the other person. Stay focused on the one issue that gets raised. Don't raise a whole other bunch of issues, because you've got all these balls in the air and you don't know which one to be working on at that moment. Stay with the issue that surfaced as the original conflict and get that resolved, and then move to the other issues. The other is I think, to remember that there is no perfect solution to a problem. We all start out thinking we have the perfect solution, because that would solve my problem. But you don't have to solve only your problem, you have to solve yours and her problem at the same time. And therefore the perfect solution that works for me doesn't always work for both of us. So one has to be prepared to give up, to discard the perfect solution in that negotiation. Listen intently to what the other person is looking for. See how you can get that to them in the context of you getting what you're looking for at the same time.
Thank you. And I would just remind our viewers that it goes on to involve other things, but you have met my request of dealing with some of the points. Janelle Burke.
I would like to talk just a little bit with you about children. Are there times that are more damaging to children when a relationship ends between their parents? What is the best time for that to happen, if there is any good time, or what factors are there to weigh
There are no best times. And each age group has a different response.
Can you give us some examples of what a small child might feel, for example, as opposed to a teenager?
Preschool child, for example, will probably have some regression. So let's say if they had, they might wet the bed for a while. The important thing for the parent they're living with at that point is to accept that that's a normal response and to just give the kid a little extra love and affection at that point, and not to feel terribly guilty. One of the problems is there's a lot of people around who make a lot of money writing books about how bad we all are when we get divorced and how we really mess our kids over, so we all feel terribly guilty. The reality is if you follow a few basic guidelines, the kids will get over the separation within about 3 months. But they all will experience those kinds of things. Now, what about the early school age children? They will also have some regression, might go back to a blanket or earlier toy that they had. They are likely to be somewhat of a disciplinary problem to the parent who's caring for them, because they're going to test some new limits around how that will look. They are going to worry a lot about the absent parent. Is he being taken care of? Who's cooking for him? Who's doing this? Same then with the middle grade school. You find a lot of kids there will spend a lot of time daydreaming at school, for example. Almost a lot of parents find that they get called in, the teacher wanting to know there's something gone wrong with Johnny or with Jane because she doesn't seem to be concentrated. A good student, and now she's spent a lot of time looking out of the window thinking about different things. And that's usually there because that child now is beginning to develop a sense of other people's needs as well as their own, so they're concerned about who's taking care of, usually dad, who's the absent parent. Teenagers have and also, by the way, that middle grade school group, much more likely to take sides because they're much more likely to see things in black and white. And then the teenagers are liable to do what I call the strategic withdrawal. That is, they walk in the door, go to the refrigerator, and up to the room, and that's the 2 points of location, and they don't see you or talk to you. But don't worry about that, because even if you don't get divorced, they do that anyway. So that's sort of and they tend to withdraw from the arguments of the parents. The one problem I think that all parents with whom the children live experience is that because they're there and the other parent has left, most children feel they can take more risks with the parent with whom they reside, therefore are liable to act up more with them. So that if you're the mother, the kids are living with you, they're likely to idealize the father who's away and try a lot more disciplinary problems with you, which makes it kind of tough when you're trying to reorganize your family around a single-parent situation. And if you're feeling guilty, will add to your guilt about that. But if you tell kids about what's happening during the divorce, if you make sure that the conflicts that you and your spouse have are kept as private as possible, the kids are not involved, and if you make sure that the children do not lose access to mom or to dad as a result of the divorce, you'll find that within about 3 months, most kids will bounce back and develop their independent relationships with each parent and move on in an appropriate way for their age group.
And just one quick question to follow up on this. If there are parties out there who are watching who have had some dispute over the children, they haven't been resolved very successfully at this point in time, is there still hope? The divorce is final now, and is there still hope for mediation after the divorce when there are problems between the parents?
Yeah. We get a lot of cases that come in of people who have been divorced for a few years and it's just not working out for one reason or the other. Usually because one of them won in court and the other one is determined not to allow that victory in the real life outside of the court. Going into mediation, even 2 or 3 years after the divorce, around the issues of the children, can be very, very valuable for relieving the tension and allowing people to get on with their lives and allowing the kids to get on with their lives.
Sue Flamia.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes, mediation techniques are being adapted for use in other entities within our culture, and I think the viewers would be interested to know some of the programs that are being developed, such as the juvenile justice programs and the health and welfare programs?
Yeah, for example, that mediation is being used nationwide around issues of children with special education needs, where any disputes between the parents and the school system are now mediated, and that empowers the parents to have some say in the matter. There's a lot of parent-teen mediation where kids who get into trouble for one reason or another are referred with their family to mediation to mediate out the issues in the family that are causing the behavior outside. I think this ties back to the previous speaker's comments about family stability. Mediation can help stabilize a family positively. It's used enormous amount now in playgrounds. There are children who wear an M armband in the playground, and when a fight breaks out, the kids call in the mediator, a kid who's been trained to help resolve the conflict before it gets out of hand. And this is found to be particularly useful in areas where violence is normative behavior. It's used a great deal in families around wills and trusts, where after the parents die and they've left something collectively or there are issues around that, this is a way for the family to come together and resolve that issue. It's being used a lot now in terms of our aging parent situation. I had a case recently where 4 sisters had an 87-year-old mother, and there was a dispute between them as to whether or not it would be best for her to go into a nursing home, and each of the sisters had a different view. When they got together, it all just got out of hand. But when they could come together with a mediator who managed those negotiations, they were able to come up with an agreement on how to deal with that. We're using it increasingly now in business, small businesses in particular, small family businesses, where you have the problems of the family flow over into the business and vice versa. We use it quite a lot there, and between business partnerships in terms of that. So that it seems to me that, and now the courts are using it more widely in big issues. There was that major multi-million-dollar lawsuit situation in Hartford, Connecticut 2 years ago, in which there were about, 300 people involved. It was the collapse of a building. And the judge finally ordered mediation, and all of the cases got mediated out to everybody's satisfaction. What was nice about it was that all of the insurance companies were very happy about it. Each of the workers, the families that were involved in it were very happy about it, because they all felt they had some say in the matter and the outcome.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. I wish we had more time. I know the panel would agree. Dr. Haynes, thank you. You have been just so informative and have contributed much to our people here.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. John Haynes, one of the world's experts on mediation, and I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, and we'll continue this series on conflict, hostility, or harmony. We hope this is assistance to you. We believe it is. Please be with us next week, and have a good week until then. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.